Okay. And we thank those presenters who have gathered here. And Rick Bennett, we're going to go ahead and start with you so you can take care of things as needed. Thank you. You do need to unmute, Rick. There you go.
Yeah, just noticed that. All right, thanks a lot. For those of you who may be watching this later or didn't hear, I'm at the hospital. My mom has COVID, and so that's why I've got the mask on, but hopefully you guys can hear me good enough. So, yeah, so I talked a little bit about some of the early schisms in the church. Just to review, there were 9 or so leaders following the death of Joseph Smith. I discussed about 5 of those, 9 or 10, I guess. Lyman White's church moved to Texas. They're no longer extant, but they're the first temple. They were temple builders, the first temple west of the Mississippi, and that was in Texas. And that settlement basically dissolved, and most of Lyman White's descendants joined the RLDS church. Another one was James Strang. Kind of his claim to fame was an angelic ordination on the day that Joseph Smith died. He also translated some Vori plates and a few other plates, and so he exhibited a lot of the same characteristics of Joseph Smith. Their church is still in existence. They've had a few schisms, but the main one is probably in Vori, Wisconsin, and Bill Shepard's a wonderful historian and member of their church that I interviewed previously. Another schism is the Sidney Rigdon / William Bickerton Church. Maybe I should share. I could share a couple of my slides. That would probably be a little bit easier for you guys. Should I share my screen? I won't share the whole presentation with you, but I'll share a couple of slides here that'll help. So Sidney Rigdon, William Bickerton, they started the what's known as the Bickertonites. It's the Church of Jesus Christ. It's probably the 3rd largest restoration group after the LDS Church and the Community of Christ. I believe they've got about 10,000 members still. So they traced their leadership to Sidney Rigdon, who following the death of Joseph Smith, Sidney Rigdon and Brigham Young excommunicated each other, and Sidney started his own church. And then it kind of fell by the wayside, and William Bickerton kind of picked up the pieces in Monongahela, Pennsylvania. They still practice speaking in tongues, still believe in the Book of Mormon. They do reject the Doctrine and Covenants, though, so that's kind of interesting there. Alpheus Cutler, the Cutlerites, they are down to about 9 members in Independence, Missouri. They're just a few blocks south of the Community of Christ Temple in Independence. They also are temple people. They perform sealings like the LDS Church does. They have an endowment like the LDS Church does. But they are down to about 9 members. So they're very small, and most of them are old, although there's a son that's in his 30s, so they're hoping that they keep things going. Granville Hedrick was another one. Most of you probably familiar with the Temple Lot group. They are just, I think, here west of the Community of Christ Temple in Independence. They also claim to have about 10,000 members, but yeah, they're just a small group. I don't know that they're actually that large anymore. So those are kind of those are 5 groups that I covered kind of below the yellow line. I figured most people know about LDS and RLDS, so I didn't need to cover that. And William Smith kind of joined with the Community of Christ, so that's kind of where he ended up. But he kind of started his own church. William Marks also ended up in the RLDS church, and then David Whitmer's church. I'd like to talk about him, but I haven't had any good experts on that. But yeah, his church is no longer extant. So Then I also talked a little bit about some of the modern schismatic groups. I'll just go by pictures here. Jim Buchanan was part of the Remnant Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Jim has since split off from them. They have their own little secession crisis. Terry Patience is the new president of the Remnant Church. They are just northeast of the Community of Christ Temple in Independence. And they're kind of old style RLDS. They still believe in lineal success. Well, they kind of believe in lineal succession. Fred Larson was their prophet. He was a descendant of Joseph Smith, but Terry Patience is not, and neither was Jim McCann. So, but anyway, so that's one group. This next picture is a picture of Ann Wild. She kind of represents a bunch of fundamentalist groups. We talked about a bunch, excuse me, a bunch of different groups there. And to be honest, she's what she calls an independent fundamentalist. They practice polygamy. The independent is probably the largest group of polygamous groups. And they're not really affiliated with anybody. So that's kind of interesting. Denver Snuffer, he started his own group known as the Remnant Movement. Technically, they are not a church. Drink water here. But so he's a prophet based in Sandy, Utah, very strongly anti-polygamist, very pro-Book of Mormon. He's come up with his own set of scriptures. These next two guys are part of a polygamous group called Christ Church, or they also call themselves the Righteous Branch. They believe in polygamy, and they're kind of their group started in 1978, just April 1978 by a guy named Gerald Peterson. They've got a couple of temples, one in Nevada and one in Southern Utah, kind of pyramid shape. Lindsay Hanson Park on the middle row here. She is not a fundamentalist, but she's not only the director of the Sunstone Foundation, but we discussed the FLDS Church, and so she's kind of she's an expert on a lot of fundamentalist groups, but we kind of got into the FLDS Church and Warren Jeffs and that sort of thing. The next picture here is Christopher Blythe. He's an LDS, but kind of a little bit of an expert on Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow situation. They are a couple of apocalyptic prophets that killed their children and are currently awaiting trial in Idaho, which is just a terrible story. We also talked a little bit about the Lundgrens, similar story in Ohio. He was a breakoff from the RLDS Church. And so some of these groups kind of have nefarious motives. This is a picture of John Pratt, the late John Pratt. He died shortly after my interview. He was an astrophysicist, and he joined with the Brazil group, a prophet by the name of Mauricio Berger, and he's still alive. Mauricio is. John unfortunately passed away from COVID last October. But we talked a little bit about the sealed Book of Mormon that their group has. And John was in the first presidency before he passed away. Next picture here is John Conrad. This is the one group of all of the groups that actually does not believe in the Book of Mormon anymore. In fact, they would not identify as even a restoration group, but their founder was a guy by the name of Maurice Glendenning. He had joined the LDS Church in the 1950s, I believe it was, or 40s maybe. And he had some visions about Moroni and some revelations, and a lot of scholars kind of consider them part of the restoration group, but they're more Messianic Christians. In fact, a lot of Jewish holidays, and they do have some revelations pertaining to Moroni. So that's kind of interesting. The bottom two are kind of the newest groups out here. On the left, we've got Dave and Christine Ferriman. They are the co-presidents, co-prophets of the Church of Jesus Christ and Christian Fellowship. They're kind of an internet organization and meet over the internet. They do temple work over the internet. They accept both LGBT members and polygamous members, which is kind of unusual to accept both. Usually you're pro-LGBT or pro-polygamy, but not both. But they are kind of both that way. And, kind of an internet church based in Ohio. And then finally, Matthew Gill, I'm probably going to be having him on as a guest here in about a month or so. He's the prophet in the UK. Excuse me. His claim to fame is he's translated the book of Jaredites. So he received some plates from the angel Raphael. Excuse me. Ordained him to be a prophet. And so he's based on what the book of Jaredites, excuse me, talks about how the Temple Stonehenge was built. These were people, basically, oh my goodness, people who date from the time of the Jaredites. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to grab a drink so I don't cough anymore. Hopefully. So I'll put myself on mute. I'll turn it over to someone else.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Appreciate that. Paul, are you still on? Okay. Well, I see him, but he's not responding. So let's see, Blair, are you? Is Blair here still?
I think maybe I can be heard.
Okay, now you can.
All right. Well, if I can be heard, and if you can lay my slides out, we'll try it this way. My connection has been poor, and David has tried to supplement, and his gets about the same as mine. So let's try it and see what we can do.
Okay, so what do you want me to do? You want me to bring the slides back up?
Yeah, put my slides up, and I'll talk about them.
Okay, let me see if I can find them. I maybe closed them down. Hang on. Oh, no, there we go. Can you see that, Paul? Oh, no, you can't because I ain't sharing. Hang on. Hang on, I gotta share the screen. There we go. Now can you see it, Paul?
I see you. I don't see the slide.
All right.
I see the slides.
I see the slide.
Okay. Other people are seeing it, Paul. I'm not sure why you aren't.
Okay.
I
Well,
got Jenny Reader.
if the other people are seeing it, that the first slide, if I recall, is oh hey, it's starting to come through. That is, it says Deb Luce Comanche has started sharing slide sharing. So that's then my internet connection is unstable.
Okay. So Jenny Reader was the
There
first.
it is. There you got it.
Okay.
All right. Well, but that's the introduction that I was going to use just to sketch through the people that were invited to come back tonight, beginning with Jenny Reader.
Right, and Jenny is not with
on
us.
The Emma Smith connection to the woman. And then we were going to, and she was pointing out that Emma was partner with Joseph, that he was protection and comfort for her husband, and also for the inspired version, and that she was a person of performance from the hymnal and the Relief Society, having been the scribe for 116 pages. And then I'm not sure if you have Blair Bryant on yet. I'm presuming he'll be on to
He
speak for
had
himself. And anyway, his efforts to understand the character plates, the character writings, has been a lifetime pursuit. And again, I wanted to compliment him for that tremendous effort to help us understand the characters. And then go on to the next slide. Well, we have Rick Bennett. He's already spoken, and we have Aric Turner. He's on tonight. Casey Kern's on tonight, so they can speak for themselves. George Potter was on last week to share about the Jaredites in Peru, and he emphasized the culture of Corral, which beginning about 3100 BC has a lot of parallels with Sumer. And so his emphasis on the possible connection between the first civilization in the Americas and the Sumerians was most intriguing. All right, can we go on to the, oh, you used some nice flowers on those slides. Very good. But can we go on to the other display where I start with I am? I was reviewing the DeBarthe presentation on the universality of the Book of Mormon message.
I don't believe I got that.
Oh,
This is all I got was these 6 slides.
well, if you didn't get that, then I wonder if I can pull it up because I sent it to myself as well. Let me see if I can. Well, I think that's not likely. Let me just give a quick summation then.
Okay, can I go ahead and stop sharing?
Yeah, you stop sharing. I will just simply try to summarize because, well, if we don't have the slides, then let me just see if I can reiterate the story. And it may be that I get myself on the screen here. We'll see. Is that that doesn't appear to be working either.
I can
All right.
see you now.
You can see me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, the presentation I gave was a substitute for Richard Howard, who was not available, and so I substituted the archetypes of mythology that we see in the study of myths compared with the Book of Mormon themes. And among those, we find that in the beginning, there's a big question mark. In the beginning, the stories often begin once upon a time. And that when the story begins once upon a time, that's one of those, in the beginning, there's a big question mark. So when we say in the beginning, God, we're really saying there's in once upon a time. We don't know when the beginning with God is. When we trace that process through, those once upon a time stories have a theme by which the protagonist, the hero, will work his way through a bunch of serious dilemmas and ultimately come out in the promised land, living happily ever after. And so when you look at the parallels between the universal archetypal stories and the stories of the Book of Mormon, there is a very strong parallel that makes it so that if we approach it correctly, I think we can demonstrate the Book of Mormon to be universal scripture, following the same pattern of many other cross-cultural stories that that people retain, believe in, and recognize as embodying significant truths by which to live. So those archetypes, those truths by which to live, incorporate many individual types. There are 12 types that I cited in the earlier presentation. The individual type is is one of the kinds that you can go on an archetypal page and try yourself to.
I think we've lost him again. We have, oh, you're muted now, Paul. Paul, you're muted.
All right, the group archetypes are the kinds that people use for working their way through the wilderness. They work their way through the desert. One of the themes is the quest for water. Another is the quest for salt. That one is often tied to the Cinderella theme. We have group themes that focus upon the quest for the promised land. Love is a major theme, and these are themes then, of course, that we also find in the Book of Mormon. The conflict in a family is one of those universal themes, and clearly that one is a major one in the Book of Mormon story. And so my point was that when we start looking at the universal themes and recognizing them in the Book of Mormon, they apply internationally, they apply around the world. And our understanding of how those apply gives us an opening, I believe, to share the Book of Mormon scripture, the Book of Mormon story, as universal scripture, and particularly because it promises that we all can work our way toward the promised land. The message that Christ said that he had other sheep that were not of this fold, and he had been out to communicate with brother Jared 2,000 years before his birth, and he had been to other places. He was going to other places. And so the evidence that Jesus was attempting to get that message across the globe is a message I think that we should be looking for, because other cultures will pick up on those themes and they may put variants on them. But from 2,000 years ago, there's enough change to make it so that if we look carefully, we'll see the Jesus message in most of the other cultures of the world, especially in the great religions. And so my hope was to encourage people to recognize the universality of the Book of Mormon, to recognize that the call for other sheep and the call for us to appreciate the promised land is a call that is open for everyone. That the Book of Mormon scripture says that Jesus was inviting everyone to the promised land, and that it would be their choice land above all others. And if you recognize how our world has been populated, people have chosen to go to their promised land and live there. Some in the Arctic, some in the Amazon rainforest, some on the mountains, some on the plains, some on the seacoasts. But we choose where we want to have our promised land. And one of the choices we need to make today is to make our thinking change so that we can participate in the promised land of Zion. Going back to the creation, I think that we look at the Garden of Eden story, and we see that when Adam and Eve chose to eat off the tree of good and evil, they dichotomized and moved their thinking into a lower standard, so that rather than the kind of embracive thinking that was characteristic while they were in the Garden of Eden, they got kicked out to where they're thinking about, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm good, you're bad.
Okay. I still see him, but I don't hear him. Blair, I think, why don't you go ahead and start your presentation, because Paul is now gone.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'm sharing my screen.
I'm not seeing it yet. Okay, now you are. It's a black screen right now.
A black screen?
Yeah.
No,
Oh, summary,
black.
reading the CT, people, plates and records. We got you.
You got it. You got it. All right, I'm not seeing it on my screen though. How am I going to do that then? All right,
Are you seeing the Zoom meeting right now?
now I'm seeing my my screen, but I'm trying to get it to start the start the slideshow. Doesn't want to start. Resume slideshow. It doesn't want to do anything.
Okay, well, perhaps if you stop sharing and then maybe read your things to us without us seeing them, is that easier?
Let me try something.
You want me to stop the share? Oh, there's the
No.
characters transcript. There you're going.
Okay, I'm going now. All
Okay.
right.
All right.
This is the characters transcript. A copy of this was made. These are the copies of the characters made from the Joseph Smith plates from which the Book of Mormon was translated, and presumably also taken to Professor Anthon back in 1828. My work with this started in 1994, and I have translated that. And what I want to talk about is the plates and the people and the records that were in those, in the characters transcript. These are the plates that were given to Joseph Smith. Well, not all of these. Let me talk about the first one, this set of plates. Can you see my cursor here? Can you see my cursor?
Is it a
This
red
is-
dot?
This is the brass plates.
Right.
All
It's a
right,
little red dot, right?
that's the little red dot, yes.
Right.
The brass plates were quoted by Nephi in the small plates of Nephi. Then that's the reason that we know that Jesus was going to be coming in the Book of Mormon 600 years before he came. It quoted the brass plates, which was primarily from the book of Isaiah. That tells about Jesus and predicts Jesus coming. The small plates of Nephi were created by Nephi for the religious record. The religious part, he was the priest of the group, the religious leader, but he was also the king. Now, he made the large plates of Nephi. He started the large plates of Nephi. Perhaps Lehi himself started it. We don't know for sure. And there's one place that refers to the plates of Lehi. And if Lehi started it, then Nephi picked it up upon Lehi's death. Anyway, the large plates of Nephi are the ones that were translated or not translated, by abridged by Mormon. So that large box of plates were given to Joseph Smith as Mormon's abridgment of the large plates. Now, Moroni was given the task of translating the Jaredite record. Down in the lower right corner here were 24 plates that were discovered by the people of Limhi. And those 24 plates were taken to King Messiah II, who was able, by the use of the interpreters, to interpret those and put them into the Hebrew translation. Now, Moroni's job was to take that record that was probably about 2,000 years worth of record and put it into a summary which became the Book of Ether in our Book of Mormon today. That was Moroni's job. Mormon, therefore, abridged these large plates of Nephi to be the first part of this record. And then Moroni slipped his record in there of the Book of Ether. Moroni had a short section with a few plates where he recorded his own book. But that's what we had, that Joseph Smith had originally. Now, there were 116 pages of manuscript that were lost in March of 1828, and the translation process came to a halt. There were a lot of things going on in Joseph Smith's life at that time, and Martin Harris lost the translation, or the manuscript, which was the translation of the first portion of these large plates. The Lord saw to it that that section would be replaced by the small plates of Nephi. And Mormon included those small plates of Nephi, saying that they whispered to him that there was for a wise purpose that they should be included. And so those were given to Joseph Smith later to replace the 116 pages that had been written before. So this is the beginning. The small plates of Nephi is the beginning of our present day Book of Mormon. Then when it finished the small plates, they started in on the rest of the large plates of Nephi. Actually, it's the other way around. When Oliver Cowdery came and became scribe for Joseph Smith, they started on page 117, continuing the story that had been lost in the lost pages. And he translated all of them down to the Book of Ether. And Moroni's Book of Ether came in there at the end. So today's Book of Mormon is quite a bit different from what a Mormon originally assumed that it would be like. Now, these are all the characters in the Caracters transcript that include the character for plates. Now, the plates character is the vertical slash mark. This is it here, plate, and this is the character for writings. This is plates. This is plates. This is plates. And this is plates, 2 plates. This is sacred plate writings, and so on. Mormon wrote all of these on the left side, and Moroni wrote his part of the Caracters transcript in a different handwriting. You can see that although this character and this one are obviously the same character, they're certainly written with a different hand. And there's a consistency of handwriting here for those characters. Consistency of handwriting with these characters. Now, I've crossed out some characters here because those are generic characters. They don't refer to any particular set of plates. But all the rest of these characters, or elements of these different characters up here, indicate specific set of plates. Now I'm going to go to take out all of these that are marked this way and then see if we can't see what's left over and find some similarities. On the left side, again, that's in the same order that we had them previously, are the characters written by Mormon. And over here on the right are the ones written by Moroni. There's some similarities. We're repeating characters. So now I'm going to group those characters together because they obviously are talking about the same thing. These characters are all referring to the brass plates. So let me tell you how I know that. This is Christ. This little loop right here on all of them is Christ. This is of Christ. All of these are of Christ. And these are Christ caused to be. Christ caused to be. Now let me break this out. Christ caused to be plate writings for people Israel. Christ caused to be plate writings for people of Israel. Well, that's common to all of these. There's something tagged along at the top that's here. It's also here, but it's not here. None of the rest of them have that. So that's obviously something different. And what I discovered was that that's the word prophecy. So these are prophetic plates for Israel. Now that's referring to the brass plates. The brass plates were taken by Nephi from the city of Jerusalem, from Laban, and taken to the New World. We do not have any original copies of the Old Testament. This happened about 600 BC, just before Babylon took the people captive into Babylon from Jerusalem. This was the Old Testament, the master copy, if you will, of the Old Testament was taken by the Nephites to the New World. Now, the first copies we've got of any writing is far after that in the Old World. Even the Dead Sea Scrolls don't date back much before 200 BC. That's 400 years after these plates were taken from Jerusalem. At any rate, all of these refer to the brass plates, and they are of Christ, inspired of Christ. And there are certain characters here where Christ caused them or commanded things to happen. And so that's why this character is slightly different from this one. Now let's go to the next set of slides, this set right here. There is something common that's in all of these, and that's this S-shaped curve here. That means testimony, and it goes through the stroke for plates. Down here, you see the S shape down at the bottom. And over here, the S shape, the top of it's a little difficult to distinguish, but that's the same S shape for plates. Now, those are all testimony plates. They are testifying of what? And I want to show you this character right here. And I'll tell you that this S-shaped character, backwards S-shaped character, means Jesus. And this curved line right here means Lord. And so this is Jesus Lord testimony plates. This is a testimony of Jesus, right from the handwriting of Mormon. Now down here, we have a character, Christ tongue, which means the Jaredite language. I won't bother to go into why it is, but that Christ tongue is the Jaredite language. Here's the Christ tongue, Jaredite language. This is the Christ plates. And so all of these characters down here deal with the Jaredite record. Now, that means we can go into this characters transcript and pinpoint the characters as to where they came from and what particular set of plates they're dealing with. Now, this is what's in the Book of Mormon right now in this blue box. That's all Joseph Smith ever saw. He never saw the brass plates. He never saw the large plates of Nephi. He never saw the 24 gold plates of Jaredite record or King Messiah's translation of them. He saw Moroni's abridgment of the Jaredite record, and he saw Mormon's abridgment of the large plates of Nephi. One more step. Here are the characters. This is saying from the testimony plates of Nephi. This is the large plates from the testimony plates of Nephi. This was produced. These are the brass plates. Christ caused to be the testimony plates for Israel, prophetic. Down here, these are testimony plate writings, but they're referring to the Jaredite record. This was testimony plate of Nephi. This is the brother of Jared plates, or brother of Jared record. King Messiah, Christ plates. All of that is written in here, and I've already covered this one, Jesus Christ, Lord, or Jesus Lord testimony plates. We can identify which of those plates are being talked about. Now, if you want some information about what I've given you, further information, here's my website, bookunsealed.com. You can go there and you'll find a book that tells how I developed this. It gives my testimony in it, has details of the translation. The details of the translation right now are slightly different than they would have been when I wrote this book in 2019. And this is my email if anybody wants to talk to me. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Blair. All right, sounds good.
Oh, yours.
Okay, so Casey, how about if you go next, please?
Okay, I will.
Thank you.
Let me share my screen here.
Okay.
So yeah, I think 2 weeks ago I came on and was very pleased to be able to share a project I've been working on, and this is the latest iteration of it. It's called Book of Mormon Online. It's a website, also works on mobile, that enables people to approach the text of the Book of Mormon in a way that is more reader friendly, that focuses on chronology and focuses on themes, and has the intent of helping people actually complete the text. The main features that you'll see here are the 12 primary categories in which I've grouped all of the text here, and each one has an outline that represents a section, and any particular section, if you click on it, it will take you into the text and present that page in such a way that the outline that was presented in that table of contents corresponds to these section headings. And then there's little summaries on the left side that lets you easily skim it. If you're wondering what was going on, how did we get here, help me understand what this is saying, then that left side is there to help you. And on the right side, we have these little collapsible boxes that open and that actually show the text as it's found in the Book of Mormon. Now, I try to be mindful of the various editions and the formats that this text took throughout history, which is why you're able to see it in both the original version, all of the versions that were printed in Joseph Smith's lifetime, as well as the printer's manuscript, which is, you can see it written here in Oliver Cowdery's handwriting as well. So that's the main thrust of this effort, was to be able to present the text and provide supplement. You can see that that here we have some images and illustrations that correspond with things, as well as commentaries that if you click here, you can find out, you can see what people have written about the text that you have just encountered. So there's a lot of other features, but for the sake of brevity, I want to focus on one thing in particular. You can see that there's these little text boxes that appear below. This allows people to come in and to make their own comments, to write their own thoughts, insights, impressions, and what have you. Last time we made a group that corresponding to the Book of Mormon's perspectives forum here, and I'm going to reshare that link for those that want to jump back in, or if you didn't get a chance to join beforehand. What you'll find is, if you click on this, you will find yourself in a chat room of sorts with everyone else in the group. So here we have everyone from last week or from last time, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, that signed up, and you can see what the most recent commentary is. So Corey, who joined us last time, and he's a Methodist who has taken an interest in the Book of Mormon, and he was with us 2 weeks ago. He just made a comment here saying, "Wow, these guys are real jerks," in reference to Layman and Lemuel disparaging Nephi's efforts here. So, if I were to click on this would take me into the very piece of text that Corey commented on there, and I would then be in a position to respond, to agree with Corey, to react or respond to his comment, or to add my own perspective. Is that actually they're not really jerks? They're actually, whatever it might be. My purpose here is not to start flame wars, but rather just to provide a platform in which these conversations can take place. So here's what we were just talking about. So what this means is that here in the Arrival and Bountiful section, Corey came across this. He read here, this section here, and highlighted it and responded saying that they were jerks. So I'm going to like this, and I'm going to say, I'll say Layman and Lemuel's, strong suit was not agreeableness. ... Okay, and so that was just my comment here. So anybody else could come in here and we could comment on this thread the way you might on Facebook or a social network. Now, in addition to that, if you go to the home feed, this is where some of these study groups are public, some of them are private. If it's private and you're in it, or if it's public and whatnot, you'll be able to see kind of what conversations are happening on the homepage. So the one that we just saw right there, Corey's message right here, my response here, anybody else can then respond to it too. And you can scroll down and say, okay, well, what had Jonathan mentioned earlier? You can see what other public groups are there. You can see Corey commented in a different group. He's in multiple groups, and he noticed that, okay, the still small voice here seems to be an echo of Kings 19:12, which if you click on this, takes you to the actual reference that he's talking about. So, this provides a way that people can come and have these types of discussions. I'll wrap things up here, but there's a lot of other appendices here, and just in reference to the previous presentation, I do want to show that I have a forthcoming analysis section, which includes data sets mainly, and I actually have one on the Characters document, and now I'm very excited to take the research that was just presented and see if I can incorporate it here. What this is an analysis of all the characters, breaks them down and shows which ones are similar, which ones where do they appear in what context? I don't have any attempt of translation here, which is why I'm very interested to take the research that we just saw and see what we can do with this. But going forward, there's going to be a lot more kind of sideshows, if you will, of data sets and research that that I want to make accessible, make easy to consume, and kind of turn it into a one-stop shop for both Book of Mormon study, for Book of Mormon research, and I want to be open to a variety of views in terms of geography. I've got a map section here, and I try to represent the major theories that are available. And I think this should be a place where people can have the discussions. Everyone can agree that the text exists, and as long as we can agree on that, then this is a place where I think we can have productive discussions, regardless of how we end up interpreting the text or the differences in our approaches to it. So that's the Book of Mormon online. Please join the group and sign up for an account and have a good time with it. Thank you.
Thanks, Casey. It has been a real interesting site for sure. Let's see. Aric?
All right, let me share my screen. So everybody can see that?
Yep.
Okay. So have all this, well, most of this information on bookofmormoninfo.com website. So I mentioned kind of starting off that I take the words of the Book of Mormon as precedence over prophecy. The words can be treated as factual as we possibly can have them because they were translated by the power of a seer. In the scriptures, the power of the seer is greater than a prophet. So in my viewpoint, prophecy must be consistent with the word descriptions. And also prophecy requires interpretation, which makes them open to change based on how the interpretation is made. And also the prophecies are not real specific about the location of the prophecies as being the same or maybe different location as what we have in the Book of Mormon word descriptions. I mentioned that the worldview of the people in the 7th century BC in the Middle East believed the seas surrounded the world and the world was a flat plate. And we can see a reference to this in Helaman 578 or 1422 in the LDS version, where it says, face of the whole earth, yea, both above the earth and beneath. So, we have references like that in the Book of Mormon, knowing that they had the same world reference that we do know the people in the Middle East had. Also, as I mentioned, the people in the 7th century BC viewed the North Sea, South Sea, East Sea, and West Sea as on the outermost portion of the world. And the fact that the Mediterranean Sea was what they considered a lagoon or extension of the West Sea that they could see in the Middle East. And likewise, the Indian Ocean, or what they call the Yam Sup, was just an extension or a lagoon, if you will, of the South Sea that was coming up to where they could see it. But to them, that was just proof that the South Sea was at the very extremity of the world. So the conclusion is Helaman 2.8 in the RLDS, 3.8 in the LDS version is really a description of a metaphor of what their view of the world was. We also took a look at looking at the scriptures, verses in the Book of Mormon, putting them all together, that they are consistent, that the land south of Zarahemla is rising terrain, which means the river of Sidon is flowing northward. There was a description or question about interpretation of the head of the river Sidon. In the Book of Mormon, it describes the head of the Sidon being the source, essentially the most uphill portion of the river Sidon. And looking at Genesis 2:10 was used as a reference, and two words as I looked at Genesis 2:10. So the end of the four heads is the Hebrew Rosh, and by all biblical scholars, that means source or commencement, not a confluence. The description of the meaning of Rosh is really good in Jesnius's Hebrew Chaldee lexicon. The URL is there if you want to go take a look at it. Also, what I noticed was that the verb parted or parad actually means separate or divide, indicating the four rivers were not connected. So this is actually an opposite definition of a confluence. Took a look at some of the, call it proofs that are in the words in the Book of Mormon. We have the, what I call the proof of the intersecting valleys. It's in the RLDS 662 to 680, or in the LDS 1426 to 15:8, where you have people that are in the narrow neck region that go, two warring factions, go to the East Coast, the Sea East Coast, have a battle, and then they go away from there and they travel through two valleys on their way to a body of water, which is considered the largest body of water. And there really is only one place in the world this exists, and this is in Mesoamerica. And these valleys don't exist on any maps until after 1865. So the question is, how would Joseph Smith know about those? I have kind of one of my favorite proofs. This is where it talks about the west and east valleys of the river Sidon. And it occurs where a place where the river Sidon goes from a place that is not wilderness to a place of wilderness. So you can see on the map here, the light green is the not wilderness, or the flat area, and the wilderness, the hilly area, is in the more browns here. And talked about the whole situation, the East Valley, the West Valley, why there's significance of this river system coming down through is the only way through the mountainous area. So the terrain here is exactly where the Book of Mormon has these places described. And the real key thing here is the Valley West does not show up on maps until after 1922 to 1934. So again, how would Joseph Smith know about the West Valley? And we talked about Helaman 2:8 through 10 in the RLDS, or 3:8 through 10 in the LDS version, talking about shipping timber from where it is to where it isn't. And in Mexico, it's very easy that in the narrow neck area, there's actually a natural lagoon system, which is a great harbor for boats. And the river system, because the land northward is described as the land of many rivers, as it empties into the West Sea, is a very navigable river, but this is all lacking in timber. So it easily explained by moving timber from where it is in the narrow neck to where it isn't. And so you put all that together. And so when I review or look at models that don't have the seas at the extremities of the world, Zarahemla is not on the Mississippi River because terrain on the Mississippi River decreases in altitude as you go south. It does not increase. And there's no place for the intersecting valleys south of Zarahemla on the Mississippi River, if that's where you want to put it in your model. Did find a really good source. Have the URL for it here. Actually talks about that Zarahemla was not even mentioned by Joseph Smith in the LDS D&C 125, that the reference to Zarahemla was actually added after his death. So that's also kind of part and parcel with trying to understand prophecy, is actually understanding what was originally said and making sure you're not working off of an edited version. So that's what I had.
Okay, thank you very much, Aric. Appreciate that. And I don't see any other presenters on. Don't think I'm missing anybody. Does anybody have any questions for Aric or Casey, or did Blair leave us? Looks like, oh no, Blair's still here. Anybody have any questions for those three presenters who are still here with us? Our group has kind of dwindled this evening.
I'm trying to be here.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Is that you?
I'm really impressed with the other presenters, and I'm so sorry that I wasn't able to get my stuff together to work. But I recognize that in a company like this, that the other presentations probably deserve to take priority anyway. So thank you.
And thanks for plugging along to stick with us, Paul.
Well, I'm sorry that my connections in Nauvoo are just so poor that I am not necessarily able to tie into the rest of the world with any continuity. Interesting how for the last 20 minutes or so, actually, I got to hear the last part of Blair's presentation, and I've had pretty good connection ever since. But earlier, I just kept getting disconnected, and so it was most frustrating.
Mhm. Anybody have any questions or discussion? Carol, go ahead and unmute, please. There you are.
Mr. Kern, C. Kern, where did you get your pictures on your presentations? Are those Mormon pictures, the paintings and stuff?
Yeah, let me pull that up. So the majority of them, let's see. Are you referring to the ones that kind of represent, let me share my screen here. Do you mean the ones that are in line, or the ones that are that represent in the table of contents?
Detailed paintings.
So these
Some
come
of
from, yeah. I mean, so some of these, this one's like Arnold Freeberg. This is Minerva Teichert. This is Walter Rain. I actually, if I can get the funding for it, I would actually like to get some original art on here right now. Right now, these are just kind of from the picture kits that kind of come along with the Book of Mormon. But I think what we were looking at earlier, there
The
are some.
Gladiatorian period. That one is especially a Book of Mormon, Mormon's rendition. The
Yeah, yes,
Gladiatorian-
that one's the Arnold Freiberg version. What you do have is throughout the text here, I think this is what we looked at before. You have some of these. These are mainly from the children's books. The first let's see, one of the main ones is this one. This is an LDS Church publication. That just kind of has some summaries with some paintings that go with it. The other one is a little more tricky to find. Is the illustrated. Let's see. Let me see if I can find this. Let's see, if you search like illustrated, here we go. It's the 16 volume set called Illustrated Stories from the Book of Mormon. I think this was published in the 1970s or so. It's now since been redone as an ebook. Yeah, here we go. And so little excerpts from these. I think that's where this one comes from. I just figured out what passage they correspond to, and there's a link to, here we go. If you click on it, there's a link that you can get the full volume. So that's
Do you have
that's
to-
yeah.
Do you have to struggle with copyright issues at that point?
So I'm never presenting the entire work. You only get, an image here or there at a time. That and actually the same goes for commentaries. What happens is, so I have the legal notice here. When you start looking through the commentaries, it's actually tracking what % of the entire work has been accessed so far, and that's to comply with the title, the U.S. Code, Title 17, Section 107, which is the primary copyright law, and it's let's see, the clause that's the legal defense at this point is the portion used in relation to the copyrighted work as a whole. So once access as recorded by usage exceeds a certain level, I can actually shut off access to not run into legal troubles. I have not. I have received a little legal counsel for this, but I haven't run into any issues. This has been at such a scale that it hasn't raised any eyebrows yet. But I have done my homework as far as legal, as what laws are on the books and what are the exemptions to it.
I also wondered about your references because the LDS and RLDS Book of Mormons are so off when it comes to the numbers. So
Right.
how can you reference with these? You're talking verse 32 in one book and you're talking different
Right.
pages, different verses in the other. How do you
Yeah.
handle the differences between references?
Well, I hadn't really even considered that until recently. I did recently get a concordance that has, the equivalent chapters and verses across the various editions. And of course, if you look at the the early ones, they didn't have verse numbers at all. So what I haven't implemented this yet, but I am committed to doing this at some point. There is a preference thing right here where you can choose what commentaries get shown. You can, do you want the illustrations on or off? Do you want the audio on and off, things like that? I'm planning on adding a section here for when you're looking at this in the English version to be able to choose your reference and have a drop down list. I want it in, and kind of pick whatever reference schema is out there. So I don't have that yet, but that is something that I do intend to do. I think it would be useful and beneficial, especially as we expand take off the blinders and see that there's a variety of communities that are interested in this text.
Thank you, and wonderful job. Thank you.
Blair, go ahead, please.
Let's see, my mic on?
Yeah, your
Can
mic's
you
on.
hear me?
Yes, we can
Okay.
hear you.
I'm wondering if there are people who are interested in learning how to read the nth and characters. I am starting to head toward small presentations which will introduce each of the basic characters. Now, there are only 20 basic characters. They can be added together to give different meanings. And so I can build on the 20 basic characters and where a person can basically look at a character, see what the elements are of the character, and therefore find the meaning of it. And in that way can read it. It's not reading as we do in English, where we have sounds that we're producing, but it's words and how the words can be put together to make new words. I'm wondering if this group of people, if there are anybody here that would like to work on something like that. And if I were to make a 10-minute presentation on, let's say, the character for tongue or the character for plates, would people like to hear that? Would people like to study that? I plan to do the work. I'm 90 years old and I haven't got much time left. So I'm going to do that work if the Lord gives me time. So anybody here interested in working with me on that and following it, I would be like to have some help. No takers. Okay.
It sounds like a wonderful opportunity, Blair, and there are quite a few people who have left our group so far, but it will be on the recording. Your invitation will be on the recording, so I'm sure there will be others who will view that as well.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Anyone else with questions or comments? Paul, do you have any news coming from the dig this week or so far this time around?
Am I live? I'm not sure if I am
Yes,
unmuted.
we can hear you. We can hear you.
All right, so we have had 30 BYU students for 3 mornings. And the result has been that the basement floor now has been largely cleared. And yes, we do have results. At this stage, I am confident that Water Street is a pre-Mormon structure. I am confident that the basement structure that was the first times of the seasons is also a pre-Mormon structure. And so the idea of rebuilding the times of the seasons means that we rebuild a pre-Mormon structure which was built without mortar as the basement, and that's the basement I think that Ebenezer Robinson and Don Carlos Smith got sick in when they were trying to publish the first times of the seasons in 1839. They got it. They started in July and got it out in November, and then Don Carlos died, and the building was expanded up on top and oriented north and south. And so we're seeing the disorientation of the 2 foundations, and the simple fact that the frame structure put on top is the one that presumably is going to be rebuilt means that we have a question about how to preserve the warehouse structure that was underneath it. In any case, we are finding clear evidence that the building was not just used as a warehouse or first times in seasons and second times in seasons, but it was also a domicile. We have numerous pieces of decorated ceramics, quite a lot of container glass, quite a lot of square nails, and we now have, I think, something over 20 pieces of type that have been found this season. And that's particularly exciting because most of the type is of the 4-point ruby design. And I think that's the same design that was used in the 1840 Book of Mormon. And then we also have several pieces of the 6-point bourgeois. And those are the 2 types that we found primarily in the 1976 excavation. We've not been successful at finding the outhouse yet. We're still looking for that one. We are anticipating more visitors, more volunteers, but we have a great deal of openings in the next 3 weeks for volunteers to come work with us. Stephen Pinecker and I think Rick Bennett are coming to Nauvoo next week, and so we're expecting and hoping to have them on the volunteer crew in the middle of next week. And any of the rest of you that would like to, I Dig Nauvoo is our webpage, and you can register there and come spend a few hours or a few days with us. And being able to find some type, being able to participate in the restoration of this rather remarkable building of such significance, I think well, it's fun and instructive. So if let me extend the invitation and say thank you for giving it consideration, because it does tie to our Book of Mormon forum. Book of Mormon was actually published there in 1840.
You found a piece of lead.
Oh yes, a couple of other interesting elements. One, we found a piece of mica, and the old timers like myself might possibly remember that mica was used in the foundry oven doors. In the grade school in where I went in Ringgold County, Riley Township, first year of my education, we had mica in the door of the oven, of the stove. And I see Carol nodding her head to recognize that too. Well, Ebenezer Robinson, when he rebuilt the Times and Seasons, built a foundry there. And so he was melting down the lead in the tin to make his own type. And if he had a foundry, then he would have had a foundry with an oven with a door with mica in it, very likely. And we found a piece of that mica. That to me is rather exciting little connection. What else was it, Rena? Oh, and it was fun for me because last Thursday I was driving down the road next to the river, and we drove past the Moffat house. Dan Moffat was in his driveway, and so I turned around and went back to speak with him because we've had a longer term relationship. The Moffat house was built in 1823, and it's still occupied by the Moffat family. They knew Joseph Smith's family. The daughter Julia, who they adopted in Kirtland, died after coming back to Nauvoo with cancer. She stayed a couple of years with Emma. Emma died in 79, and then she went to the Moffats and lived with them for the last 2 years of her life. And they buried her in the Moffat cemetery, the Catholic cemetery here in Nauvoo. So here's a very close relationship between the Moffats and the Smiths. Well, Dan was kind enough to point out that Robert E. Lee had been here. He couldn't remember when, but I happened to have seen the map, so he remembered it too. But he said when Robert Lee dredged the Mississippi, the Des Moines Rapids, to make it so it'd be open for the boats, and he mentioned that Lee's map showed the Moffat house. Lee's map was 1835. So here is a document demonstrating that the road that went from Captain James White's house out on the point of Nauvoo, past the homestead, past the Hibbert house, down past the Moffat house, that road is Water Street. And the Mormons simply expanded it by the red brick store and by the homestead and mansion house on Main Street, expanded it to 66 feet wide there, but it's crooked, narrow, and Hiram Smith had his store door in the middle of the street. Fascinating. And it just the fact is that Water Street pre-existed the Mormons, who named their streets with Parley and Sydney and so forth, to Mormon names. So just compelling data to demonstrate that our basement is actually a pre-Mormon structure. Oh, and those of you who heard the Tuttle presentation, Boyd Tuttle was advocating that you come to Montrose and work on the Phoenicia. We found the Phoenicia site. We weren't able to get in, but It is a nice big building, just a little bit off the highway. And I understand that they are still inviting people in on the weekdays to put the Phoenicia back together again. I'm not particularly meaning to advocate for that geography, but it is a fascinating tie back to our Book of Mormon perspectives forum.
Fantastic.
And we also found the big mound.
Oh, yeah.
I was anxious to find the big mound because I'd read that in 1843, Joseph and Emma had ridden out from the mansion house and went to visit the big mound. And then he bought it and apparently lost it when he went through the bankruptcy. And so here's a big mound, the highest point in Hancock County. And
It's
Rena
a-
and I spent 2 afternoons driving the roads of this portion of Hancock County looking for that big mound. I had seen it some 30 years ago, so I had a good idea of what it was supposed to look like. And we drove by it twice, but it has been flattened enough that I didn't quite recognize it. We finally called Chuck Tripp, and he indicated that we were, well, he grew up just 3 miles south of it. And so he said, look, you're just 1 mile away from it, so go west. And sure enough, 1 mile west, we looked down the road, and there it was. And we went up to the door to ask the farmer to see the artifacts, and nobody answered the door. So I took pictures, and so at least I've got the picture for the Mansion House book. One of the episodes that Joseph and Emma took a trip out of the Mansion House to go see the big mound, and now I can show where that mound was that they ended up purchasing.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Paul. I have 9:35. Does anybody else have any comments or questions for any of our presenters?
If not, then I'll sing. Good night, the Lord is watching o'er you. Good night, his blessings go before you. Good night, and we'll be praying for you. So good night, may God bless you. And thank you for participating.
Thanks, Paul.
And
Thanks.
thank you, Deb, for covering.
You're welcome. We made it through, everybody. Thank you so much. Kathy, thanks for co-hosting with me.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thank you, Deb, for surviving the COVID.
Yeah, thank you.
We're
Yeah.
praying for you. All right. Good night.